Birthdays are supposed to be magical. For most people, they are filled with balloons, cakes, and the sound of voices singing your name as you blow out candles and make a wish. But for me, birthdays became something else entirely, a reminder of where I stood in my family, or rather, how invisible I was within it. From the time I was little, there was always a sharp contrast between the way my brother's birthday was celebrated and the way mine was brushed aside. I still remember being 6 years old, peeking through the railing at the top of the stairs while my parents hung streamers for my brother's party. The house was alive with excitement. Tables were set up in the yard, a clown had been hired to make balloon animals, and boxes of pizza, stacked high on the counter, filled the kitchen with a smell that made my stomach rumble. His cake was a giant, 3-tiered monster truck masterpiece, glowing candles already waiting to be lit. I smiled for him, of course, but there was a sting in my chest even at that age, because just 3 months earlier, on my birthday, my celebration had been a store-bought cupcake with a single candle stuck in it. No balloons. No guests. Not even a happy birthday song. My mom said she was too tired that day. My dad told me, "We'll do something bigger next year." That next year never came. As the years went by, the difference only grew. By the time I turned 10, my brother was having his birthdays at rented play centers and arcades, surrounded by friends, relatives, and neighbors. They gave him expensive gifts, a new bike, a video game console, even a puppy one year. Meanwhile, when my birthday rolled around, the excuses were always the same. "We're busy. We don't have money right now. We'll celebrate later." But later never arrived. I tried not to cry, but lying in bed at night, I'd hear my brother's laughter echoing in my memory, and I couldn't stop wondering why I wasn't worth the same effort. When I got older, I stopped asking. The disappointment was too painful. Instead, I pretended it didn't matter. When friends at school asked, "What did you do for your birthday?" I lied. I told them we had a nice family dinner, or that I wanted something quiet. In reality, sometimes my birthday passed with no acknowledgement at all. There were years when the only person who remembered was my grandmother, who'd slip me a card with $20 tucked inside and whisper, "Happy birthday, sweetheart," as if it were a secret. That card meant everything because it was the only proof that my day had significance. Still, the gap between my brother and me grew wider. His Sweet 16 was practically a festival, decorated tents, a live band, hundreds of photos uploaded to social media by my proud parents. That same year, my birthday was forgotten entirely. Not even a text. I spent the evening alone in my room, scrolling through pictures of his celebration while fighting back tears. I told myself it didn't matter, that birthdays were just days. But inside, I felt like a ghost. By the time I was in my 20s, the tradition had solidified. His birthdays were annual spectacles. Mine were afterthoughts. One year, when I turned 21, I actually bought my own cake. I went to the store, picked out a small chocolate cake, and lit the candles alone in my apartment. I sang happy birthday quietly to myself, blowing out the candles with a wish that one day, my family would finally see me. But the truth was, they never did. Every year, the hurt compounded. It wasn't just about parties or presents, it was about what those gestures meant. Birthdays are symbolic. They say, "You matter. We're glad you were born." And when that acknowledgement is stripped away year after year, it starts to feel like maybe you don't matter at all. Maybe your existence is something to be tolerated, not celebrated. But pain has a way of transforming into determination. And that's exactly what happened to me. I began to realize that their neglect wasn't just forgetfulness, it was a choice. They chose to celebrate him. They chose to ignore me. And if they could make that choice, then so could I. I could choose not to let it define me anymore. This year was different. Something in me snapped. I wasn't going to let another birthday pass as if I didn't exist. I wasn't going to wait for their half-hearted excuses or empty promises. This time, I was going to take matters into my own hands. And in doing so, I was going to make sure they remembered me, not because they wanted to, but because I would force them to. They thought they could keep ignoring me, but they had no idea what I was capable of when pushed to the edge. And so the stage was set. The forgotten daughter, the invisible sibling, was about to become unforgettable. Patterns don't form overnight. They're built slowly, quietly, so much so that you almost don't notice them until the weight of years makes them impossible to ignore. That's how it was with my family and my birthdays. The neglect wasn't a single moment, it was a repeating cycle, a ritual of disappointment that etched itself into my life. When I was little, maybe 6 or 7, I tried to shrug it off. Kids are resilient like that. My brother's birthday would arrive with a thunderclap of excitement, balloons floating from the ceiling, cousins running through the house, mountains of presents stacked so high they looked like Christmas in the middle of summer. The air would buzz with energy, everyone laughing, cheering, singing. And then, months later, my birthday would drift in like an afterthought. Maybe a card, maybe a cake picked up last minute from the grocery store, maybe just a mumbled happy birthday, sweetheart, while dishes clinked in the sink. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. Maybe they were tired. Maybe it was just bad timing. But as I got older, the excuses wore thinner and thinner. My mom would sigh and say, "We're just so busy this year." My dad would promise, "We'll do something big next time, I swear." But next time never came. Next time was always reserved for my brother. When I turned 10, I remember asking for a party at the roller skating rink. Nothing extravagant, just a couple of friends, some music, maybe a pizza or two. My mom smiled faintly and said, "We'll see." I clung to those words for weeks, imagining how fun it would be, picturing my friends skating under the colorful lights. But on the morning of my birthday, instead of balloons or excitement, I found a small store-bought cake on the kitchen counter with my name spelled wrong in icing. My dad patted my head, muttered "Happy birthday, kiddo," and went back to reading the newspaper. I sat there staring at the cake, a lump forming in my throat. Later that same year, my brother's birthday rolled around, and they rented a laser tag arena. 20 kids showed up, shouting, laughing, running with neon vests and glowing guns. My mom handed out goodie bags stuffed with candy and toys. And I stood there, clapping and smiling, swallowing the ache in my chest. This became the rhythm of my life, their joy for him, silence for me. By high school, the pattern was undeniable. My brother's Sweet 16 was practically a festival. They booked a banquet hall, hired a DJ, and invited everyone he knew. My parents gave him the keys to his first car, a shiny used Honda Civic that he drove proudly into the parking lot while cameras flashed and relatives cheered. And me? That same year, when I turned 16, my party was a takeout dinner eaten at the kitchen table, just the 4 of us, no decorations, no cake. My dad tried to make a toast, but even that felt half-hearted. I remember sneaking into the bathroom afterward, locking the door, and crying silently so no one would hear. Over time, I stopped expecting. I stopped asking. I stopped hoping. When you've been let down enough times, you learn to lower your expectations until they scrape the floor. Birthdays became just another day for me. A day I worked, studied, or stayed home while my family carried on as if nothing was different. The only person who seemed to remember consistently was my grandmother. Every year, without fail, she mailed me a handwritten card with a crisp bill tucked inside. Sometimes it was $10, sometimes $20, but it wasn't about the money. It was about the thought, the acknowledgement. She'd write little notes like, "I'm so proud of you," or "Never forget how special you are." Those cards became my lifeline, the only reminder that my existence was worth celebrating to someone. But still, the hurt dug deeper. Birthdays weren't just about cake and gifts, they were about belonging, about recognition. Watching my brother receive mountains of love and attention while I got crumbs left me feeling like I didn't belong in my own family. And no matter how much I tried to act like it didn't matter, the truth was, it mattered. It mattered a lot. Looking back, I think the hardest part wasn't the absence of celebration. It was the message it carried. Every forgotten birthday whispered, "You're not important." You're not worth the effort. And as those whispers piled up year after year, they became a roar in my head, echoing in every quiet, candleless evening I spent alone. But what my family didn't realize was that with every year they ignored me, they weren't breaking me, they were building something inside me. A fire. A determination. A hunger for acknowledgement, for justice. Because when you've been sidelined long enough, one of two things happens: you either fade into the background permanently, or you rise and force people to see you. And I knew, deep down, I wasn't the type to fade. Not forever. Resentment doesn't just appear overnight, it grows quietly, seeping into you like water dripping on stone until eventually, it carves deep cracks you can't ignore. By the time I was a teenager, those cracks inside me were wide open. Every year, the pattern repeated. My brother celebrated with fireworks while my birthday slipped by like it was nothing more than a Tuesday. And each year, the bitterness inside me grew heavier, sharper, harder to swallow. I remember being 14, standing in the corner of our living room during my brother's party. Music blasted from rented speakers, kids from his school crowded the house, laughing and dancing, their hands full of pizza and soda. My parents glowed with pride, snapping photos and recording videos like they were producing a movie. I stood there holding a half-empty soda can, invisible, watching as my brother unwrapped a brand-new laptop. He grinned, thanked everyone dramatically, and my mom kissed his cheek like he had just won an award. Meanwhile, my 14th birthday had been celebrated with a single card from my grandmother. Nothing else. Not even dinner. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking, why not me? What was so wrong with me that I didn't deserve the same joy? Was I less lovable, less worthy, less important? These thoughts ate at me like poison. The more they celebrated him, the more it felt like they were announcing to the world that he mattered more. In high school, the resentment became harder to hide. I stopped trying to act happy at his parties. I stopped clapping when he blew out candles. Sometimes I didn't even show up, locking myself in my room instead. My parents scolded me for being ungrateful or dramatic, as if my pain was just a bad attitude I could fix with a smile. They didn't see that their neglect was shaping me, turning me colder, teaching me how to build walls so high no one could reach over them. The breaking point came the year I turned 18. 18 is supposed to be a milestone, a day you finally step into adulthood, a day your family acknowledges with pride. My brother had gotten a massive party for his 18th, complete with a rented hall and a shiny used car waiting in the driveway as a gift. I remember standing in that driveway, clapping as he hugged my dad, while my own heart cracked wide open. And then, 3 months later, when I turned 18, my celebration was a $10 bill shoved into my hand by my mom with the words, "Go get yourself something nice." That was it. No dinner. No cake. Not even a family photo. I smiled tightly and said thank you, but inside, I was raging. It was in that moment I realized the truth: my family wasn't going to change. They weren't going to wake up one day and see me. I was going to have to make them see me. From that point on, the resentment burned hotter. Every year that passed added fuel to the fire. I stopped caring about their excuses. I stopped hoping for better. Instead, I started dreaming of the day I'd finally get my chance to flip the script, to take all the years of being overlooked and use them as ammunition. My brother's birthdays became almost unbearable to attend, not because of him personally, but because of the way my parents doted on him while treating me like an afterthought. I started noticing how even the relatives picked up on the favoritism, how they brought him gifts while offering me nothing more than a handshake. My grandmother tried to balance it with her little cards, but she was just one voice against a chorus of indifference. Bitterness is a dangerous thing, but it can also be powerful. For me, it became fuel. Fuel to prove them wrong. Fuel to take back control of my story. Fuel to make sure that one day, when my birthday rolled around, they would never forget it again. They would remember, not because they wanted to, but because I would force them to. And as another year approached, with my birthday once again looming like a shadow behind my brother's glittering celebrations, I felt something shift inside me. I was done with silence. I was done with being invisible. The resentment had grown too large to ignore. This time, I would act. Every person has a limit, and after years of being dismissed, ignored, and treated like a shadow in my own family, I finally hit mine. It wasn't a dramatic explosion at first, not yelling or tears, but a quiet, cold realization that I had been carrying bitterness around like a stone in my chest for too long. The truth was, I had reached a breaking point, and it came slowly, like water dripping until the bucket could no longer hold it. This year, as my birthday crept closer, the signs of neglect were already written in the air. There was no mention of it at the dinner table, no casual "what do you want to do for your day?" from my parents, no spark of anticipation. Meanwhile, my brother's birthday, which fell only a few weeks later, was once again being planned like a national holiday. I overheard my mom one evening while she was on the phone with my aunt. "We'll need to book the hall early this time. Last year, we almost didn't get the date we wanted." Oh, and I was thinking of going with a blue and silver theme, maybe even get a professional photographer again. My aunt laughed and said, "You really outdo yourself every year." My mom replied proudly, "Well, it's his special day. He deserves it." Her words hit me like a slap. He deserves it. And what about me? Did I deserve nothing? Was I so unworthy of recognition that my birthday could be erased year after year? The anger that had been simmering inside me for so long boiled over in that moment. Later that night, I sat in my room staring at the calendar. My birthday is just 2 weeks away. 2 weeks, and there hadn't been a single word about it. Not a plan, not an idea, not even a hint. My brother's date, circled in bright marker, stood out boldly on the kitchen calendar downstairs. Mine? Completely blank, as if it were any other day. I thought back to all the times I had accepted it quietly, telling myself I was strong enough not to care. I thought about the store-bought cakes with misspelled icing, the dinners eaten in silence, the broken promises of "we'll celebrate later." I thought about the photos on social media, my brother surrounded by balloons, gifts, smiling relatives, while my own birthdays passed like ghosts. And in that moment, something inside me hardened. No more. This year was going to be different. If they couldn't see my worth, I would show them. If they wanted to forget, I would make sure they remembered. Not just remembered, I would make sure my birthday was something they would never be able to erase from their minds again. The decision came quietly but firmly. I wasn't going to sit back and wait for another disappointment. I was going to take control. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to beg for acknowledgement or pretend I didn't care. This time, I was going to create my own celebration, one so undeniable, so visible, that their years of excuses would shatter under the weight of it. The next day, at Sunday dinner, the conversation drifted, as usual, to my brother. My dad was asking him about what kind of cake he wanted this year. "Chocolate fudge with strawberries," my brother said without hesitation. My mom nodded, already planning in her head, and my dad smiled proudly. I sat there quietly, pushing food around my plate, listening to them talk about decorations and guest lists. At one point, my mom laughed and said, "Photos are tricky. One bad shot and you regret it forever." She said it casually, but I caught the smirk on her face, and for some reason, it felt like a jab, like a reminder that my birthdays were never worth capturing in photos. That night, I lay awake in bed replaying the conversation. My parents were pouring their energy, money, and time into yet another celebration for my brother, while my day was invisible yet again. It wasn't just about jealousy, it was about justice. It was about balance. And for the first time, I decided I was going to tip the scales myself. The plan hadn't fully formed yet, but the resolve was there, strong and unshakable. This year, I wouldn't sit quietly on the sidelines. I wouldn't accept being forgotten. This year, I would create something unforgettable, something they couldn't brush aside, something that would expose the years of unfairness for what they really were. They thought I would keep swallowing my pain in silence. They thought I would keep letting it slide. But they were wrong. Because this year, for the first time in my life, I wasn't just going to survive another forgotten birthday, I was going to turn it into my moment of revenge. Once the decision was made, the rest of my days felt electric with a sense of purpose I had never known before. For years, I had been passive, letting my family dictate how much I mattered, letting their silence become the measure of my worth. But now? Now the silence was gone. Every thought, every step, every glance at the calendar was filled with one goal: creating a birthday they could never erase, one that would force them to see me. It started small, with an idea that had been simmering at the back of my mind for a long time: if they wouldn't celebrate me, I would celebrate myself. But it wouldn't just be a quiet dinner or a few friends hanging out. No, this had to be big, bold, undeniable. I wanted the kind of party that would eclipse my brothers, the kind that would make people talk, the kind that would expose just how lopsided things had been all along. The first step was deciding who to invite. I thought about all the relatives who dutifully showed up at my brother's celebrations year after year. Many of them had looked at me with pity, some had even whispered things like, "It's a shame they don't do more for you." I decided to test their loyalty. I started sending quiet messages, not group texts but personal ones, to cousins, family friends, even my grandmother's neighbors who had attended more of my brother's parties than mine. "Hey," I wrote, "I'm hosting something for my birthday this year. I'd love it if you came." The responses shocked me. One by one, people replied with enthusiasm. "Of course. About time you did something for yourself. Can't wait. Send me the details." It dawned on me that maybe I hadn't been as invisible as I thought. People noticed the imbalance, they just never spoke up. And now, they were eager to support me. Next came the venue. There was no way I was hosting this in my parents' house, not when it would feel like I was begging for their approval. I wanted neutral ground, a space that would belong to me alone. I scrolled through listings online until I found it, a cozy but elegant event hall downtown, with fairy lights strung across the ceiling and enough space for dancing. It wasn't cheap, but I had been saving quietly from my job for months. What better way to spend that money than on myself, on reclaiming all the birthdays I had been denied? I booked it without hesitation, my heart racing as the confirmation email landed in my inbox. Then came the details, the fun part. I chose decorations in gold and deep blue, colors that felt regal and powerful. I ordered a cake taller than any my brother had ever had, with intricate icing flowers and my name written clearly across the top. I planned food, drinks, music, and even a photographer. If my parents thought photos were tricky, well, I would make sure there were more photos of my birthday than of any of his combined. Every detail became an act of rebellion, a way of saying, I matter. I exist. And you can't erase me anymore. But the most satisfying part of the plan wasn't the decorations or even the guest list, it was the timing. My brother's party was scheduled for Saturday night. I scheduled mine for the same weekend, but on Sunday evening, just late enough that people would still be buzzing from his event, still scrolling through social media, when mine would burst onto their feeds like fireworks. And oh, there would be posts. I made sure of it. I told friends and cousins to take as many pictures as they wanted, to post them, to tag me, to make sure the whole family saw. It wasn't about competing for likes, it was about visibility, about proof that I wasn't some forgotten footnote. As the day drew closer, I kept everything quiet. I showed up at home dinners, listening to my parents rave about the party they were throwing for my brother, nodding politely as if I had nothing going on. My mom even said once, "We'll have to find time to take you out for a meal soon," in that vague way she always did when she wanted to brush off my birthday. I smiled, biting back the words that wanted to spill out. She had no idea. None of them did. And that was the sweetest part of the plan, the secrecy. They had taught me for years how to stay quiet, how to hold my tongue, how to live in the background. And now I was using that same silence as a weapon. They thought I was doing nothing, accepting the neglect yet again. In reality, I was building something that would blindside them completely. Every time I pictured their faces when they found out, I felt a thrill of anticipation. For once, I wouldn't be the one left crying in my room while balloons floated in someone else's honor. This time, the laughter, the music, the applause, it would all be for me. And my family, whether they liked it or not, would have no choice but to see it. The weekend arrived like a storm I had been waiting years to unleash. Saturday was my brother's day, the one my parents had poured all their money and attention into, the one that had been hyped for weeks. I woke up to the sound of my mom in the kitchen, humming as she arranged trays of food for the caterers, my dad outside stringing up decorations like his life depended on it. The house buzzed with energy, every corner alive with preparation. For him. Always for him. I kept my face neutral, offering to help with small things so they wouldn't suspect anything. I carried plates to the table, straightened chairs, and even tied a few balloons. My mom smiled absently and said, "Thank you, sweetie. We'll make it up to you soon." The same words she always used, the same promise she never kept. Inside, I wanted to laugh. Make it up to me? If only she knew. By evening, guests began arriving in waves, their arms full of gifts wrapped in shiny paper. Laughter filled the air, music pulsed from rented speakers, and my brother basked in it all like a king on his throne. He wore the smug grin he always did at his parties, the kind that said he knew he was the star, the chosen one. My parents beamed at him, snapping photos, handing him envelopes of money and presents. I stood in the corner, sipping a soda, invisible as always. But this time, instead of bitterness, I felt a strange calm wash over me. Let them have their night. Tomorrow belonged to me. I stayed just long enough to be polite. I watched him cut his cake, 3 layers, covered in fondant, the number of candles too many to count. I clapped half-heartedly when he blew them out, then leaned over to whisper to my mom, "I'm heading out early, not feeling great." She nodded distractedly, barely registering my words as she fussed with party guests. Perfect. No one noticed when I slipped out the door. While they danced and laughed into the night, I was across town putting the final touches on my own celebration. The hall I had rented was transformed into something magical. Golden lights shimmered across the ceiling, tables draped in deep blue cloth glowed under candlelight, and in the center stood the tallest cake I had ever had, 5 tiers, each one decorated with intricate flowers and designs that spelled my name clearly, proudly. Olivia. For once, my name wasn't an afterthought. It was the centerpiece. As my friends began arriving, the energy shifted. This wasn't pity. This wasn't charity. This was genuine excitement, people thrilled to be here for me, to celebrate me. One of my cousins hugged me tightly and whispered, "Finally. You deserve this." Another snapped a photo of me standing by the cake, posting it instantly with the caption, "Best birthday ever for the most overlooked person I know." Notifications started flooding in within minutes. My social media lit up with tags, photos, and videos. The contrast was undeniable. While my brother's party was still fresh in everyone's mind, here was mine, bigger, brighter, filled with people who actually cared. The night unfolded like a dream. Music played, people danced, and the photographer I hired captured every laugh, every smile, every toast. For once, I wasn't the shadow on the edge of someone else's spotlight, I was the light itself. When I blew out my candles, the room erupted in cheers so loud it drowned out years of silence. Tears stunned my eyes, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from joy, from the sweet taste of vindication. Meanwhile, across town, my family began to notice. At first, it was little things, an aunt scrolling through her phone, pausing when she saw photos of me laughing under golden lights. A cousin excused himself from my brother's party early to come join mine. Then more and more people trickled out, leaving his celebration half empty while mine grew fuller. By the time my parents realized what was happening, it was too late. The narrative had already shifted. My birthday was the event people were talking about. By the end of the night, I stood on the stage, microphone in hand, looking out at a room full of smiling faces. "Thank you," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "Thank you for reminding me that I matter." The applause that followed felt like the loudest sound I had ever heard. For the first time in my life, I wasn't forgotten. I wasn't invisible. I was unforgettable. The morning after my party, the silence in our house felt heavier than usual. It wasn't the ordinary kind of quiet, it was sharp, pointed, the kind of silence that meant everyone had seen the truth they were trying so hard to ignore. My phone was still buzzing with notifications from friends and relatives tagging me in photos, commenting on how beautiful the night was, how overdue it had been for me to finally have my moment. And I knew, without a doubt, my parents and brother had seen every single post. At breakfast, my mom barely looked at me. She pushed scrambled eggs around her plate, her lips pressed into a tight line. My dad cleared his throat a few times like he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. My brother, on the other hand, was fuming. He slammed his juice glass onto the table and snapped, "You had to do it on the same weekend, huh? Couldn't let me have one day?" I met his glare calmly and replied, "I let you have every day for 25 years. One weekend was mine." He had no comeback. The tension only grew. Later that afternoon, my mom finally exploded. "Do you have any idea how embarrassed you made us look? Relatives were leaving his party to go to yours. Do you know how humiliating that was for us?" Her voice shook with anger, but underneath it, I could hear something else, fear. Fear that the image of the perfect, balanced family had been shattered. I laughed bitterly. Embarrassed? Humiliated? Try invisible. Try being erased every year while you made sure he was treated like royalty. You think one night of embarrassment makes up for years of neglect? My dad tried to intervene. "Olivia, that's not fair," I cut him off. "Not fair? Do you want me to list it? The years you forgot entirely. The birthdays where the only person who remembered was Grandma. The promises of "we'll celebrate later" that never came. Meanwhile, he got DJs, cars, banquets, and halls full of people. You tell me, Dad, what's fair about that?" The room went still. For once, there were no excuses ready, no easy lies to cover the truth. They looked at me like they were seeing me for the first time, and maybe they were. My mom's eyes welled with tears, but whether it was from guilt or anger, I couldn't tell. She whispered, "You didn't have to humiliate us publicly. You could have talked to us." That was the moment I finally snapped. "Talked to you?" I tried. For years, I tried. I hinted, I asked, I hoped. And every time, you brushed me off. You didn't forget my birthday, you forgot me. You taught me my worth was less, and you expected me to stay silent. Well, I'm not silent anymore. My words hung in the air like thunder. For once, no one dared to speak over me. My brother muttered something under his breath and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. My dad buried his face in his hands, and my mom sat frozen, her fork untouched on her plate. Later that evening, I received messages from relatives who had been at both parties. Some apologized for not speaking up sooner. Some admitted they had always felt uncomfortable with how differently I was treated, but didn't want to cause drama. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had caused the drama they had been too afraid to, and in doing so, I'd forced everyone to acknowledge what had been ignored for decades. That night, I sat in my room scrolling through the photos from my celebration. Me laughing with my friends. I blew out candles while people cheered. Me standing tall, finally shining in a way I had been denied for so long. And I realized, the confrontation wasn't just about making them see the truth, it was about me claiming it for myself. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just the forgotten daughter. I was the one who had flipped the script. In the quiet days after the storm, I found myself thinking less about the confrontation and more about what it meant for me. For so long, my birthdays had been painful reminders of my invisibility. They weren't just forgotten dates on a calendar, they were symbols of the way my family dismissed me, sidelined me, and chose to invest all their love and energy in my brother. I had carried that weight like a stone, pretending it didn't matter while silently breaking inside. But now, things were different. Scrolling through the photos from my party, I felt something I hadn't in years: peace. There I was, laughing, smiling, surrounded by people who had come for me. The decorations sparkled in the background, the cake gleamed under the lights, and every image was proof that I mattered. For once, I wasn't the shadow, I was the center, the star of my own story. And the best part? I had created it myself. The fallout with my family still lingered. My parents avoided me for days, retreating into their own guilt or anger, I couldn't tell which. My brother sulked, his ego bruised that his spotlight had been stolen. But strangely, their reactions didn't hurt me the way they once would have. Instead, they confirmed what I had always known: waiting for them to value me was a waste of time. The real power was in valuing myself. I realized then that revenge isn't always about destruction. It isn't always about screaming matches or ruined reputations. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is quiet. It's creating something so undeniable that people have no choice but to acknowledge it. My party wasn't just about balloons and cake, it was a declaration that I refused to be erased. That I wasn't going to shrink myself to fit their neglect anymore. And the ripple effects were undeniable. Relatives reached out, some apologizing for not speaking up sooner, some praising me for finally standing up for myself. My grandmother called, her voice warm with pride. "About time," she said, laughing softly. "I always knew you had it in you." That one sentence made my chest tighten with gratitude. Because while my parents had failed me, she had always seen me. She had been the one to remind me I mattered, year after year, with her little handwritten cards. And now, she was alive to see me reclaim what was mine. The confrontation with my parents replayed in my head often. My words, "You didn't forget my birthday. You forgot me," echoed like a drumbeat. And every time I thought about it, I felt stronger. Because it was true. They had erased me, and I had let them, until the day I decided I wouldn't anymore. Looking forward, I knew things would never be the same between us. Maybe my parents would never fully understand the damage they had done. Maybe my brother would always resent me for daring to take attention away from him. But I wasn't afraid of that anymore. Because I had learned something crucial: family isn't defined by who shares your blood. Family is who shows up for you, who sees you, who celebrates you, even when it's inconvenient. And sometimes, you have to build that family yourself. As the dust settled, I felt lighter. Stronger. For the first time, my birthday wasn't a wound, it was a triumph. And while my parents might try to downplay it, while my brother might sulk, the truth was clear: they could never take this away from me. They could never erase what I had created. This year, I gave myself the gift I had been denied my whole life: recognition. And that gift was more powerful than anything they could have given me. Because it wasn't about cake or decorations. It was about reclaiming my worth. So when people ask me now about my birthday, I don't lie or brush it off. I smile and say, it was unforgettable. Because it was. Not just for me, but for everyone who finally saw me for who I am. And maybe that's the greatest revenge of all: not making them feel small, but making myself feel whole. Kindly like and subscribe for more stories. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching.